Free will. This is what Wayne Grudem in Grudem's Systematic Theology, pages 330 and 331. This is how he addresses it. Are we free? Do we have free will? If God exercises providential control over all events, are we in any sense free? The answer depends on what is meant by the word free. In some senses, the word free, everyone agrees that we are free in our will and in our choices. Even prominent theologians in the Reformed or Calvinistic tradition concur. Both Louis Berkhof in his Systematic Theology and John Calvin in his Institutes of the Christian Religion are willing to speak in some sense of the free acts and choices of man. However, Calvin explains that the term is so subject to misunderstanding that he himself tries to avoid using it. This is because free will is not sufficient to enable man to do good works, unless he be helped by grace. Therefore, Calvin concludes, man will then be spoken of as having this sort of free decision, not because he has free choice equally of good and evil, but because he acts wickedly by will, not by compulsion. Well put, indeed, but what purpose is served by labeling with a proud name such as a slight thing? Calvin continues by explaining how this term is easily misunderstood. But how few men are there, I ask, who when they hear free will attributed to man, do not immediately conceive him to be the master of both his own mind and will, able of his own power to turn himself toward either good or evil. If anyone then can use this word without understanding it in a bad sense, I shall not trouble him on this account. I'd prefer not to use it myself, and I should like others, if they seek my advice, to avoid it. Thus, when we ask whether we have free will, it is important to be clear as to what is meant by the phrase. Scripture nowhere says that we are free in the sense of being outside of God's control, or of being able to make decisions that are not caused by anything. This is the sense in which many people seem to assume we must be free. Nor does it say that we are free in the sense of being able to do right on our own apart from God's power. But we are nonetheless free in the greatest sense that any creature of God could be free. We make willing choices that have real effects. We are aware of no restraints on our own will from God when we make decisions. We must insist that we have the power of willing choice. Otherwise, we will fall into the error of fatalism or determinism, and thus conclude that our choices do not matter, or that we cannot really make willing choices. On the other hand, the kind of freedom that is demanded by those who deny God's providential control of all things, a freedom to be outside of God's sustaining and controlling activity, would be impossible if Jesus Christ is indeed continually carrying out all things by his word of power. Hebrews 1:3. If this is true, then to be outside of that providential control would simply be not to exist. An absolute freedom, totally free of God's control, is simply not possible in a world providentially sustained and directed by God himself.